owned it a little. Even if Cotgrave and I had a relationship, like a granddad and his granddaughter, I'd have said, okay, maybe I owe him this. But it's not like he ever took me fishing or taught me how to fix a car engine or whatever bullshit grandfathers are supposed to do. I don't know. I didn't have one on the other side either. My maternal grandmother was a widow, but she didn't remarry, and she spent a lot of time giving money to televangelists and telling other people about Jesus. Oh, she also believed in crystal power and aliens, come to think of it, pretty much the same way she believed in Jesus and never saw any contradiction in the two. People are complicated. All I remember about Cotgrave was an old man with no hair reading the paper and getting snipped at. My dad said he could play a really cutthroat game of cribbage. Maybe that's why my grandmother wanted to marry him, for his sexy cribbage game. Hell if I know. The only other thing I remember about him was the sound of a typewriter. He couldn't type very fast, but I'd hear the noise from his study, which was a back bedroom with ratty carpet. Clack, clack, plonk, clack, screech of carriage return, clack. I don't know when or how he died. I was in college and dead broke, and nobody thought I'd come back for the funeral. We weren't big on funerals in my family. I know some families have these massive orgies of grief where all the third cousins come back and sob over the casket, but we're not like that. Everybody gets cremated, and then somebody takes the ashes, and after they've sat around on the mantelpiece long enough to get creepy, they get dumped in the ocean, and that's the end of that. Cotgrave had a funeral, I guess, or a memorial service or something. Aunt Kate told me that a bunch of weird people showed up. Such odd people, she said. I think he might have been in one of those societies. You know, like the Elks or the Freemasons or whatever. They weren't rude, just odd. Your grandmother was pissed. Grandma's always pissed. Well, you aren't wrong. Now, of course, I wish I'd known more about the odd people. But I doubt Kate knew anything. She probably talked to all of them and got their life story. She had that ability, but she would have forgotten it as soon as she heard it. Kate was a wonderful sounding board because she had a memory like a sieve. You could tell her anything you wanted in confidence, and odds were good she wouldn't remember it an hour later. I lived with Aunt Kate after Mom died, and she really did her best to remember things like doctor visits and parent-teacher conferences, but she wasn't always great about that either. Anyway, fast forward a decade, and some change later, and my grandmother finally died. She was 101. There's a line of poetry I always think of, though I can't remember who said it. The good die first, and they whose hearts are dry as summer dust burn to the socket. Grandma burned to the socket, all right. I didn't go to that funeral either. Actually, I don't think there was one. Dad didn't have the energy anymore. He wasn't dying or anything, but he was old. He'd been over 40 when I was born, and he was 81 now, and he just couldn't deal with it. Not much point, is there? He said on the phone. The only reason anyone would show up was to make sure she was actually dead. I laughed. Dad didn't have any illusions about his mother. I still remember when I was young and Mom had just died, and he'd asked Grandma to babysit. I marched in that evening and crawled into his lap and informed him that she was mean and I didn't like her at all. In another family, I might have been told that I loved my grandmother and was a naughty child, but my father only sighed and rubbed his forehead and said that, yes, he knew what she was like, but he didn't have any other options. He took me to the library that weekend so that I could read in my room, and after a few months of that, I went to live with Aunt Kate. After I'd finished laughing, not that it was funny, but it was true, I stayed on the line and listened to Dad breathe too hard. His lungs were probably going to be what killed him. They were only a little creaky right now, but you could hear it coming, a rasp down at the bottom that was going to turn into emphysema.